Picture a world where the changing seasons were a mystery, where farmers had to rely on guesswork to plant their crops, and sailors navigated vast oceans using nothing but stories passed down through generations. There were no calendars to mark the days, no clocks to count the hours, just the sun, the moon, and the stars moving in patterns that seemed both beautiful and bewildering. For thousands of years, this was the reality for nearly every human civilization. But then something extraordinary happened. People began to look up at the night sky, not just with wonder, but with a deep, burning curiosity to understand its rhythms. They realized that the heavens held the key to time itself, and they set out to build structures that could decode the cosmos. These weren't the sophisticated observatories we know today with giant telescopes and digital sensors. They were built from stone, wood, and earth monuments aligned with the solstices, towers designed to track the movement of planets, and circles arranged to capture the first light of the rising sun on the equinox. Over time, these forgotten observatories transformed human civilization. They allowed societies to predict seasonal changes, organize their rituals, and even legitimize the rule of kings and priests. They blended science with spirituality, architecture with astronomy, and practicality with profound ingenuity. And yet, so many of these sites have been overlooked, buried by time, sand, or simply the march of so-called progress. In this video, we're going to rediscover 22 of these hidden gems, each one a testament to humanity's timeless drive to understand the universe. From the Sahara Desert to the highlands of Peru, from the jungles of the Maya to the plains of North America, we'll explore how ancient cultures measured time with nothing but their eyes, their minds, and their unwavering determination. These observatories didn't just tell them when to plant or when to celebrate. They shaped entire worldviews, laid the groundwork for modern astronomy, and connected people to the cosmos in ways we're only beginning to appreciate. So come with us on a journey across continents and millennia, where every stone has a story, and every alignment reveals another piece of the grand puzzle of human knowledge. Long before the invention of the telescope or even the written word, our ancestors looked up at the night sky and saw more than just random points of light. They witnessed a grand, predictable clockwork, a celestial dance that dictated the rhythms of life on Earth. This was the dawn of astronomical observation, a time when humanity's first scientists used nothing but their naked eyes and relentless curiosity to decode the universe. Imagine a Neolithic farmer thousands of years ago watching the horizon intently. They would have noticed that the sun doesn't rise and set in the same spot every day. Over the course of a year, it travels along the horizon, moving northward as the days grow longer and warmer, and southward as they shorten and cool. This simple observation became the world's first calendar. By placing a stake in the ground or lining up a pair of stones with a distant mountain notch, they could mark the sun's extreme northern and southern points, the solstices. Knowing when the longest and shortest days of the year would occur was not a matter of academic interest, it was a matter of survival. It told them precisely when to plant seeds to catch the spring rains, when to harvest crops before the autumn frosts, and when to move livestock to seasonal pastures. But their gaze wasn't fixed solely on the sun. The moon, with its constantly shifting phases and its slower, more complex cycle across the sky, offered another way to measure the passage of time. Many early cultures developed lunar calendars, counting the days between full moons. They also noticed that certain bright stars would disappear for a period and then reappear just before dawn, heralding the change of seasons. The star Sirius, for example, held immense importance for ancient Egyptians because its return to the morning sky coincided with the annual flooding of the Nile, an event that rejuvenated the land and made agriculture possible. This deep connection between celestial events and terrestrial life meant that astronomy was never a purely scientific pursuit. It was inextricably woven into the fabric of spirituality, mythology, and community identity. The sky was the realm of gods and ancestors, and by understanding its patterns, people believed they could understand the will of the divine. A solar eclipse wasn't just a shadow, it was a dragon swallowing the sun. The Milky Way wasn't just a band of stars, it was a path for spirits or a great river in the heavens. This fusion of empirical observation and spiritual belief gave birth to the very first observatories. These were not buildings in the modern sense, but carefully crafted landscapes. They were circles of timber posts like the one built at Cahokia, or arrangements of massive stones like those at Nabta Playa. The architects of these sites possessed a sophisticated understanding of geometry and a painstaking patience for precision, aligning their monuments to capture a specific sliver of sunlight on a single, sacred day of the year. These structures served as both practical tools and profound temples, places where a priest astronomer could determine the correct date for a harvest festival, and in the very same moment, feel a connection to the cosmic order. This foundational work, happening independently across the globe, from the deserts of Africa to the forests of Europe and the islands of the Pacific, represents one of humanity's greatest and most universal intellectual achievements. It set the stage for everything that was to come, laying the groundwork for the mathematics, engineering, and precise timekeeping that would define civilizations. By understanding this humble yet brilliant origin, we can truly appreciate the magnificent stone complexes and towers we are about to explore, seeing them not as ancient ruins, but as the culmination of millennia of human wonder. To truly grasp the significance of these ancient structures, we must move beyond our modern compartmentalization of knowledge. For the builders of these first observatories, there was no line separating the laboratory from the temple, the calculator from the cathedral. These sites were the very heart of their communities, functioning as central hubs where the pursuit of celestial understanding was woven into every thread of society. Imagine a Mayan priest astronomer ascending the steep steps of the Caracol Tower. His goal is not purely academic. He is scanning the horizon for the heliacal rising of Venus, an event believed to signal a time of war. His precise calculations, based on generations of observation, will directly advise the king on when to launch military campaigns. In that moment, science, religion, and statecraft are one and the same. The observatory is the tool that binds them together, transforming an astronomical event into a geopolitical strategy and a divine omen. This fusion of purpose extended far beyond the elite. For the common farmer, the local stone circle or solar marker was as essential as any plow. It was a communal calendar, etched in stone and aligned with the heavens, that dictated the rhythm of their entire year. The winter solstice wasn't just an astronomical term. It was a day of celebration, marking the sun's rebirth and the slow return of longer days. The spring equinox was a signal to prepare the fields, a date determined not by a parchment scroll, but by a beam of sunlight piercing the inner chamber of a temple at dawn. This shared, public method of timekeeping created a powerful social cohesion. Everyone in the community operated on the same schedule, participated in the same rituals, and shared the same understanding of the world's cyclical nature. It was a common language of time that everyone could read, fostering a collective identity and a sense of order in an often unpredictable world. The architectural ambition of these sites themselves speaks to their cultural paramountcy. Constructing something like Stonehenge, with its multi-ton sarsen stones transported over immense distances, required a staggering mobilization of labor, resources, and engineering skill. This was not a project undertaken lightly. Its very existence points to a society that placed an immense value on what the structure represented. It was a permanent, undeniable assertion of their worldview, a belief that human affairs were a direct reflection of cosmic order. By aligning their most enduring monuments with the solstices, they were literally grounding the cycles of the universe in their own landscape, claiming a sacred connection to the mechanics of the cosmos. This legitimized the authority of rulers who could claim to interpret these celestial patterns, and it motivated the population to contribute to these massive projects, believing they were participating in a work of profound spiritual and practical importance. Furthermore, the intellectual challenge of accurately predicting celestial events drove advancements in mathematics and engineering that might otherwise never have occurred. The Maya, for instance, developed a complex calendar system so precise it required a concept of zero and a deep understanding of long-cycle mathematics. The builders of the Jantar Mantar in India created massive, fixed astronomical instruments out of stone and masonry, solving complex problems of geometry and scale to achieve remarkable accuracy without lenses or moving parts. This pursuit of celestial knowledge forced innovation, proving that necessity, especially a necessity born of spiritual, political, and agricultural needs, is indeed the mother of invention. The legacy of these ancient observatories offers a powerful lesson for our own time. They stand as monuments to a holistic way of knowing, where different disciplines were not isolated but integrated. They remind us that the deepest understanding often occurs at the intersections where science meets art, where calculation meets ceremony, and where the human drive to find meaning in the stars shapes the very world we build on the ground. Now let's travel back more than 9,000 years to a place that defies all our expectations of where and how astronomy began. Picture the vast, arid expanse of the Sahara Desert, but not as we know it today. Around 7,500 years before the Common Era, this region was a savanna, a greener, more hospitable land with seasonal lakes and grasslands that supported life. It was here, in what is now southern Egypt, that a group of nomadic cattle herders did something extraordinary. Instead of simply passing through, they stopped and arranged massive stones into precise patterns on the playa, the flat desert floor. This site, known as Nabta Playa, is not just old, it is profoundly ancient, predating Stonehenge by thousands of years and standing as one of the very first known astronomical observatories on Earth. What makes Nabta Playa so remarkable is the sophistication of its design. These early astronomers moved megaliths, some weighing several tons, to create alignments that tracked the movements of the heavens. A central stone slab, now called the calendar stone, is surrounded by other smaller megaliths that form a series of sightlines. One key alignment points to the summer solstice sunrise, the longest day of the year. But their curiosity reached far beyond the sun. Other stones are arranged to mark the rising points of bright, important stars, most notably Sirius. For these ancient people, the heliacal rising of Sirius, its first appearance in the dawn sky after a period of invisibility, was not just a celestial event. It was a critical signal, a herald of the approaching monsoon rains that would fill the seasonal lake and provide water for their herds. Their survival in this challenging environment depended entirely on this precise astronomical prediction. The implications of this are staggering. We often imagine that such advanced, calibrated science requires a settled, agricultural society with dedicated priestly classes and permanent cities. Nabta Playa turns that assumption on its head. These were nomadic people moving with their cattle, yet they possessed the collective knowledge, organizational skill, and sheer will to create a permanent, monumental calendar in stone. They invested immense effort into a structure they would only visit seasonally, proving that the desire to understand and mark time was a powerful enough force to reshape their relationship with the landscape itself. The site also reveals a deep spiritual dimension. Archaeologists have found cattle burials and other ceremonial artifacts nearby, suggesting that the act of observation was accompanied by rituals. For them, the arrival of the rains was both a practical necessity and a sacred event, a moment to honor the cosmic forces that sustained their lives. The legacy of Nabta Playa did not simply vanish when the climate changed and the Sahara dried out, transforming back into a desert. There is compelling evidence that the knowledge developed here migrated northward, influencing the later astronomical practices of the great Egyptian civilization that arose along the Nile. The profound importance of Sirius in Egyptian culture, where its rise signaled the annual flooding of the Nile, may have its roots in these much older Saharan traditions. For millennia, Nabta Playa lay silent and forgotten, buried under the desert sands, its secrets hidden until a team of archaeologists stumbled upon it in the 1970s. Its rediscovery is a powerful reminder that the pages of history are not always found in libraries. Sometimes they are written in stone under a vast, starry sky, waiting for the right moment to share their story with a new generation. Now, let's journey westward from the Sahara to the heart of the Mediterranean Sea, to a small archipelago whose influence on ancient history is far greater than its size would suggest. Around 3,600 years before the Common Era, on the southern coast of Malta, a culture with no known predecessors and no written language began to erect structures of such complexity and precision that they still baffle engineers today. The Mnajdra Temple complex is not a single building but a cluster of 3 temples, built from massive blocks of Globigerina limestone, all meticulously designed to capture the sun's light on the most important days of the year. This was a society that had not yet discovered metal, relying on stone tools and sheer collective will to shape their world. Yet they achieved a level of astronomical alignment that feels almost futuristic in its conception. The most breathtaking feature of Mnajdra is how it harnesses the sun to mark the passage of time with theatrical brilliance. The lower temple, the best preserved of the 3, is oriented with an accuracy that seems impossible for its era. On the spring and autumn equinoxes, when day and night are of equal length, the first rays of the rising sun slice through the main doorway. This beam of light does not simply illuminate the entrance. It travels inward, a precise and narrow shaft that penetrates deep into the central apse, the innermost sacred chamber of the temple. It strikes a specific limestone slab, washing it in a warm, golden light. This event would have been a powerful, visible confirmation that the balance of the year had been achieved, a signal to begin the rituals of planting or harvest. The experience is even more dramatic on the solstices. During the summer solstice, the sun's rays highlight the edges of a large stone slab to the left of the doorway, while on the winter solstice, the light illuminates a corresponding slab on the right. This creates a yearly solar clock, with the sun's light moving back and forth across the temple facade like a cosmic pendulum, marking the sun's extreme northern and southern journeys. We must pause to consider the immense intellectual effort this represents. The builders of Mnajdra did not have the benefit of a written number system or complex geometry as we understand it. Their genius was one of patient, generations-long observation. They had to track the sun's slow, incremental movement along the horizon for decades, perhaps even centuries, to identify these key turning points in the year. Then they had to translate that celestial knowledge into a massive, permanent stone structure. The engineering challenge was monumental. Each multi-ton stone had to be quarried, transported, and positioned with incredible care. An error of just a few degrees would mean the entire effect would be lost, the sunlight missing its target for eternity. That they succeeded so perfectly speaks to a deep, culturally ingrained reverence for the sky and its cycles, and a technical skill that we are only now beginning to fully appreciate. The purpose of this celestial machinery was undoubtedly woven into the spiritual and practical fabric of their lives. While we can never know their exact beliefs, the evidence points to a society that saw no distinction between the cycles of nature, the worship of their ancestors, and the movement of the heavens. The temples themselves are often described as having a cloverleaf shape, with curved walls and apses that may symbolize the womb or a nurturing embrace. It is easy to imagine the community gathering in the pre-dawn darkness on an equinox, waiting in silence for the sun's first light to pierce the doorway and announce the arrival of a new season. This would have been a moment of profound communal connection, a reaffirmation of their place in the cosmic order. The light show was not just a calendar, it was a religious experience, a direct communication with the divine forces that governed their fertility, their food supply, and their very survival. Mnajdra stands as a defiant challenge to the outdated idea of prehistoric people as primitive or simple. Here, on an isolated island, a culture developed a sophisticated understanding of solar cycles entirely on its own, without influence from the larger continents. It is a powerful testament to the universal human drive to find meaning and order in the universe. The preservation of these temples, now protected under a modern canopy, offers us a rare and precious window into a Neolithic mind. It allows us to witness the moment when architecture became more than shelter, when it became a sacred instrument for measuring time itself, a permanent stone prayer offered up to the sky. Leaving the Mediterranean behind, we now venture deep into the lush jungles of the Yucatan Peninsula, where the Maya civilization erected one of the most architecturally unique and intellectually sophisticated observatories in the ancient world. Rising from the ceremonial complex of Chichen Itza is a structure that stands in stark contrast to the towering stepped pyramids surrounding it. This is the Caracol, a name bestowed by the Spanish centuries later, meaning the snail, for the curious spiral staircase that winds its way through its interior. Built around 900 years into the Common Era, this circular tower is a testament to a singular obsession, the relentless and precise tracking of the planet Venus. For the Maya, Venus was far more than a beautiful evening star. It was a deity, a harbinger of change, and most significantly, a god of war known as Kukulkan in his celestial form. Its movements across the sky were believed to directly influence the fate of kings and kingdoms. The entire design of the Caracol served as a massive stone calculator dedicated to predicting the planet's complex cycles. Its windows and sightlines are not randomly placed. They are precisely aligned with the extreme northern and southern points of Venus on the horizon, as well as with key solar events like the equinox sunsets. A priest astronomer standing within the tower's upper chamber could use these narrow apertures to make incredibly accurate observations, marking the planet's disappearance as the morning star and its reappearance as the evening star after a period of invisibility. These celestial events were not merely noted, they were meticulously timed and used to schedule some of the most critical activities in Maya society. The heliacal rising of Venus, for instance, was considered an auspicious, albeit dangerous, time to commence military campaigns. Rulers would launch raids and wars based on this celestial schedule, believing the god's influence would grant them victory. Similarly, the timing of important religious ceremonies, coronations, and agricultural festivals were all dictated by the precise data gathered from this building. The genius of the Caracol extends beyond its astronomical function into the realm of pure symbolism. Its circular form is a radical departure from the rectilinear architecture typical of the Maya, and this was almost certainly intentional. The spiral staircase and the domed roof mimic the shell of a snail, an animal that carries its home in a perfect cyclical spiral. This was a powerful metaphor for the Maya concept of time itself, not as a linear progression, but as a series of repeating sacred cycles. The very structure was a physical manifestation of their core belief that time was cyclical and that celestial patterns would forever repeat. This blending of profound cosmological philosophy with cutting-edge scientific practice is what makes the Caracol so extraordinary. It was simultaneously a functional scientific instrument, a temple for worship, and a permanent symbol of a world where the celestial and the terrestrial were inextricably linked. While the grand pyramids of Chichen Itza often steal the spotlight, the Caracol reveals a different, perhaps even more impressive, side of Maya genius. It speaks to a society that achieved a level of mathematical and astronomical precision that would not be rivaled in Europe for centuries. Their ability to calculate the 584-day synodic period of Venus with such accuracy, and to then architecturally encode that knowledge into stone, is a staggering intellectual feat. The ruins of the Caracol stand today not just as a reminder of their technical skill, but of a culture that lived and breathed astronomy. Their daily life, their politics, their religion, and their very understanding of reality were all filtered through the lens of the cosmos, observed and recorded from within the windows of this remarkable snail-shaped tower. While the Maya were perfecting their celestial calculations in the Americas, a different kind of astronomical revolution was taking shape on the other side of the world. In the early 1720s, in the vibrant pink city of Jaipur, India, a remarkable ruler with a profound passion for the stars embarked on an ambitious project. Maharaja Jai Singh II was not just a king, he was a scholar, an astronomer, and an innovator who looked at the night sky and saw an opportunity for profound renewal. Dissatisfied with the inaccuracies in the existing astronomical tables used for both Islamic and Hindu calendars, he conceived a plan to build a set of instruments so massive and so precise that they could recalibrate humanity's understanding of time itself. The result was the Jantar Mantar, an open-air laboratory of astronomy that remains one of the most breathtaking and underappreciated scientific sites on Earth. What makes the Jantar Mantar so immediately astonishing is its sheer scale and its stark geometric beauty. This is not a building filled with delicate brass instruments. Instead, it is a collection of 19 monumental structures, each one a fixed, purpose-built calculator crafted from local stone and marble. The most iconic of these is the Samrat Yantra, which translates to the supreme instrument. It is a giant right-angled triangle, its hypotenuse, a massive ramp pointing directly towards the North Pole. This structure functions as an enormous sundial, but that simple description doesn't do it justice. The shadow cast by its towering gnomon moves across carefully calibrated marble scales at a rate of 1 millimeter per second, allowing astrologers and astronomers to tell the local time with an accuracy of just 2 seconds. Standing beside it, you are humbled not just by its size, but by the sheer intellectual confidence it represents, the belief that one could capture the movement of the sun and tell the time of day with a precision that rivaled the finest mechanical clocks of Europe, using nothing but geometry, shadow, and stone. But the Jantar Mantar is far more than a giant sundial. It is a complete astronomical toolkit. The Jai Prakash Yantra consists of 2 hemispherical bowls sunk into the ground, each with a map of the celestial hemispheres. An observer could move across a small bridge suspended over the bowl, taking measurements of a star's position from different angles to achieve incredible accuracy. The Ram Yantra is a pair of complementary cylindrical structures used to measure the altitude and azimuth of celestial bodies. Each instrument was designed for a specific, complex function, from predicting eclipses to tracking the orbits of planets. The true genius of Jai Singh's vision was his synthesis of different astronomical traditions. He drew upon ancient Hindu texts, incorporated the advanced mathematical principles of Persian and Islamic astronomy from the Mughal courts, and even studied European techniques. He was attempting a grand unification of global knowledge, creating a new, more accurate system that could serve all of his people. Despite its monumental presence and profound utility, the Jantar Mantar and the story it tells was largely forgotten by the wider world for centuries. As the British East India Company consolidated power and Western telescopes became the symbol of scientific progress, these massive stone instruments were dismissed as archaic curiosities, relics of a pre-technological past. They fell into disrepair, their precise scales crumbling and their functions misunderstood. This neglect is a powerful symbol of how colonial narratives often actively overlooked and undervalued the sophisticated scientific achievements of indigenous cultures. The renaissance of Indian astronomy that Jai Singh championed was sidelined, its contributions written out of the mainstream history of science for generations. It wasn't until the 20th century, with Indian independence and a renewed sense of cultural pride, that the Jantar Mantar was restored to its former glory, allowing us to finally appreciate its brilliance. The site stands today as a defiant rebuttal to the idea that technological complexity is the only path to precision. There are no lenses here, no gears, no moving parts that could wear out or break. The Jantar Mantar achieves its astonishing accuracy through pure, elegant geometry and masterful masonry. It is astronomy rendered in architecture, a permanent testament to the power of the human mind to decode the cosmos using the most fundamental tools: angle, shadow, and scale. It represents a fleeting moment where an enlightened ruler invested immense resources not in conquest, but in knowledge, a quest to harmonize calendars, understand the heavens, and give his people a more reliable way to mark the passage of their lives. High atop a flattened mountain ridge in what is now Oaxaca, Mexico, the ancient Zapotec city of Monte Albon commanded a breathtaking view of the surrounding valleys. It was here, around the year 500 of the Common Era, that a unique structure was built, one that would earn the name El Caracol, the snail, for the distinctive spiral shape that once crowned its summit. This was not a grand pyramid or a sprawling palace. It was something far more specialized. El Caracol was a purpose-built astronomical observatory, a silent testament to the Zapotec people's sophisticated understanding of the cosmos and their deep desire to weave its patterns into the very fabric of their daily existence. The strategic placement of this observatory was its first stroke of genius. By constructing it on this elevated plateau, the Zapotec astronomers eliminated the visual clutter of the horizon. They created a pristine, 360-degree canvas of the night sky, utterly unobstructed by hills or forests. This crystal-clear vantage point allowed their priest astronomers to track the movements of stars and planets with incredible precision, free from any earthly interference. One of the key celestial bodies they followed was the bright star Capella in the constellation Auriga. The observatory was carefully aligned to mark Capella's cosmical setting, its final disappearance below the western horizon just after sunset. This specific astronomical event served as a critical signal, a herald that the all-important rainy season was imminent. For an agricultural society living in a region with a distinct dry season, this was not abstract knowledge. Predicting the arrival of the rains with accuracy meant the difference between a bountiful harvest and devastating famine. It dictated when to clear the fields, when to plant the maize, and how to manage the city's water resources. El Caracol was in essence the beating heart of Zapotec civic and agricultural planning, but the function of this building extended far beyond the practical. The artifacts discovered within and around its base, including carved stones and ceremonial objects, strongly suggest it was also a sacred space for divination. For the Zapotec, the cosmos was not a cold, mechanical clock. It was a living, breathing entity, a realm of gods and ancestors whose movements directly influenced human destiny. By decoding the patterns of the stars, they believed they could interpret the will of the divine and foresee events on Earth. A particular planetary alignment or the sudden appearance of a comet might be read as an omen, advising the city's rulers on matters of war, diplomacy, or trade. This seamless fusion of rigorous empirical observation with spiritual belief is what makes El Caracol so fascinating. It was a laboratory and a temple, a place where science and religion were not opposing forces but two sides of the same coin, both essential for understanding a complex and often unpredictable world. The architectural design of El Caracol itself reveals a profound legacy. Its spiral form, likely representing the cyclical nature of time and the cosmos, did not emerge in a vacuum. This distinctive feature appears to be an architectural concept that was transferred and adapted across Mesoamerica. We see clear echoes of its design philosophy in the later, more famous caracol of Chichen Itza, built by the Maya centuries later. This suggests a vibrant exchange of astronomical and architectural knowledge among the great civilizations of the region, a shared intellectual project that stretched across hundreds of years and miles. The Zapotec of Monte Albon were not isolated geniuses. They were key contributors to a pan-Mesoamerican scientific tradition, innovating and then passing their discoveries on to future cultures. For a long time, the narrative of scientific advancement was overwhelmingly Eurocentric, often ignoring or downplaying the independent intellectual achievements of pre-Columbian America. The rediscovery and careful study of sites like El Caracol fundamentally challenges that outdated perspective. Here, on a mountaintop in Oaxaca, a society without European contact, without the telescope, and without the wheel, developed a complex and accurate astronomical system entirely on its own. They engineered a specialized building to house this knowledge, using it to run their economy, guide their spiritual lives, and assert their understanding of the universe. El Caracol stands not as a mysterious ruin, but as a powerful monument to human curiosity and ingenuity, proving that the drive to comprehend the stars is a universal human trait that has flourished in every corner of the globe. High in the arid volcanic hills of what is now North Macedonia, a site known as Cohesion offers a humbling glimpse into the astronomical ingenuity of Bronze Age Europe. Dating back to around 1,800 years before the Common Era, this megalithic observatory wasn't built by a grand empire with armies of laborers, but by a local pastoral community. They chose the summit of a volcanic hill, over 3,300 feet above sea level, for a reason we can still appreciate today: the utterly pristine, unobstructed view of the horizon in every direction. Here, they carefully positioned massive stone blocks to function as a sophisticated celestial calendar, carving precise notches and markers into the living rock that aligned with the rising and setting points of the sun and moon throughout the year. For the farmers of this community, Cohesion was an essential agricultural tool. By observing where the sun rose along the horizon on a given morning, they could know exactly where they were in the annual cycle. Specific markers corresponded with the solstices and equinoxes, the critical turning points of the year that dictated when to plant crops, when to harvest, and when to move their herds to seasonal pastures. This wasn't a matter of casual interest. Their very survival depended on this precise, reliable knowledge. but their observations reached even further into the night sky. The site contains separate, highly accurate markers for tracking the complex 18.6-year cycle of the Moon. This long-term tracking suggests an astonishingly early grasp of what would later be known in Greece as the Metonic cycle, the 19-year period after which the phases of the Moon repeat on the same calendar dates. This lunar knowledge would have been crucial for scheduling rituals and understanding longer-term seasonal patterns. Beyond its function as a scientific instrument, Cohesion was clearly a sacred space, a place where the community gathered to connect with the cosmic order. This is powerfully evidenced by the presence of several stone thrones, carved directly from the rock face and positioned in a way that suggests they were reserved for a ruling elder or a priestly figure. One can easily imagine the entire community ascending the hill at dawn on the summer solstice, gathering to witness the sunrise perfectly aligned between two specific stone markers. The leader would sit upon the central throne, perhaps conducting a ceremony to honor the sun at its peak power, ensuring the fertility of the land and the well-being of the people. This fusion of the deeply practical with the profoundly spiritual is what makes Cohesion so compelling. It was both an almanac and a cathedral, a laboratory and a temple. The rediscovery of Cohesion in 2001 by a local archaeologist sent ripples through the historical community. It forcefully challenged the long-held narrative that advanced astronomical observation was an invention of the classical Mediterranean world. Here was clear physical proof that over 1,000 years before the construction of the Parthenon in Athens, a seemingly humble Bronze Age culture in the Balkans had achieved a sophisticated understanding of celestial mechanics. They encoded this knowledge not in fragile parchment or clay tablets, but permanently onto the landscape itself. Cohesion stands as a powerful monument to the idea that the drive to understand the universe is a fundamental human impulse, one that flourishes not just in great capitals and royal courts, but in small, interconnected communities whose names are lost to time, but whose genius is etched in stone for eternity. While the mountaintop observatories of the Zapotec and the stone circles of Europe reveal the power of isolated observation, some of the most profound astronomical advancements emerged from vibrant, crowded urban centers. For over 2 millennia, the city of Ujjain, located in the heart of the Indian subcontinent, served as one of these unparalleled intellectual hubs. It was more than just a city. It was one of the prime meridians for Hindu astronomy, a place where the grid of the celestial sphere was formally anchored to the Earth. Its geographical position was no accident. Ujjain sits almost precisely on the Tropic of Cancer, the northernmost latitude where the sun can appear directly overhead at noon. This made it the perfect natural laboratory for determining the exact timings of the solstices and equinoxes, the fundamental pillars of any calendar system. From at least 500 years before the Common Era, Ujjain attracted the greatest mathematical and astronomical minds of the age, becoming a crucible where theory met meticulous observation. It was here that a revolutionary tradition known as Siddhantic astronomy was developed and refined. The Siddhantas were a series of profound astronomical treatises that moved beyond mere mythological descriptions of the cosmos and into the realm of precise mathematical prediction. The most brilliant figure associated with this Ujjain tradition is the mathematician and astronomer Aryabhata, who lived around the turn of the 6th century. In his monumental work, the Aryabhatiya, he presented calculations for planetary orbits, the circumference of the Earth, and the causes of solar and lunar eclipses that were stunningly advanced for their time. He proposed that the Earth rotates on its axis, explaining the apparent movement of the stars, and he calculated the value of pi to 4 decimal places. All of this intellectual work was supported by physical observatories within the city, where a variety of instruments were used to gather the raw data that fueled these theoretical leaps. Large gnomons or shadow instruments precisely measured the sun's angle, while other devices tracked the movements of the moon and planets against the backdrop of fixed stars. The output of this intense scholarship was not abstract academic exercise. It was woven directly into the daily life of millions. The calendars produced in Ujjain were masterpieces of practical astronomy. They could predict lunar and solar eclipses with remarkable accuracy, events of immense religious significance that were often viewed with a mixture of awe and terror. More routinely, these calendars precisely delineated the seasons, providing farmers across the subcontinent and Southeast Asia with an unshakable schedule for planting and harvesting. They also set the dates for a countless number of festivals and holy days, synchronizing the spiritual rhythm of an entire civilization with the clockwork of the cosmos. The influence of the Ujjain system radiated outward, shaping timekeeping traditions from Java to Cambodia, as Indian cultural and scientific ideas traveled along trade routes. For centuries, the profound contributions of Ujjain and the Siddhantic tradition were largely erased from the global history of science. During the colonial era, the narrative of scientific progress was often written to emphasize a lineage running from Greece through the Islamic Golden Age and into Renaissance Europe. The sophisticated, independent discoveries of Indian astronomers were frequently dismissed, overlooked, or simply unknown to Western scholars. The physical structures of the observatories in Ujjain themselves fell into disrepair, with many of the current instruments dating to a much later reconstruction effort. It is only through modern scholarship and a renewed examination of the ancient texts that we are beginning to fully appreciate the magnitude of what was achieved there. Ujjain stands as a powerful testament to the idea that great science has always flourished in great cities, where scholars can gather, debate, and build upon each other's work, creating a legacy of knowledge that can guide a civilization for thousands of years. Now let's cross the Atlantic and journey to the very heart of North America, to a place that completely shatters the stereotype of prehistoric nomadic tribes. Around the year 1000 of the Common Era, on a vast floodplain near the confluence of the Mississippi, Missouri, and Illinois rivers, a city arose that would become the largest metropolitan area north of Mexico. This was Cahokia, a bustling center of the Mississippian culture, home to tens of thousands of people with sprawling plazas, monumental earthen mounds, and a complex social structure. And at the center of this vibrant, sophisticated society, its people built an observatory, but not from stone. They used wood, and they called it, though we cannot know their name for it, what we now know as the Cahokia Woodhenge. This was not a single structure, but a series of 5 large circles, each constructed and then rebuilt over the centuries. The most famous of these, dubbed Woodhenge III by archaeologists, consisted of 48 massive cedar posts arranged in a perfect circle over 400 feet in diameter. Unlike the enduring stone circles of Europe, this was a living, organic calendar. The cedar posts, set deep into the earth, would have towered above the people, creating a sacred space that was both open to the sky and meticulously ordered. The genius of its design lies in its elegant simplicity. At the very center of the circle stood a single, crucial observation post. On the morning of the spring equinox, a priest or sun watcher standing at this central post would see the sun rise directly over a specific marker post on the eastern edge of the circle. This alignment would declare the official arrival of spring, a signal that would ripple throughout the entire community. The same precise effect would occur for the autumn equinox and the winter and summer solstices, with the sun aligning with different designated posts around the circle's perimeter. For the people of Cahokia, this was far more than an abstract astronomical exercise. It was the very engine of their agricultural and ceremonial year. The equinox alignment told them it was time to prepare the fields for the vital maize crop that sustained their large population. The solstice markers would have dictated the timing of major community gatherings, trading festivals, and undoubtedly, important religious ceremonies dedicated to the sun deity they revered. We can imagine the entire community gathering in the pre-dawn chill on one of these sacred days, waiting in anticipation for the moment when the chief priest confirmed the sun's perfect alignment. It was a moment that blended empirical observation with profound spiritual celebration, uniting science, religion, and community in a single, shared experience. The woodhenge was the clock that set the rhythm for one of the most advanced civilizations in ancient North America. The story of its rediscovery is a testament to the patience and cleverness of modern archaeology. When European settlers first encountered the great mounds of Cahokia, they could not conceive that Native Americans had built them. They attributed them to a lost race of giants or some other mythical people. The woodhenge itself left no towering ruins. All that remained were dark stains in the soil postholes left by the long-rotted cedar logs. It wasn't until the 1960s that an archaeologist named Warren Whitry, carefully mapping these patterns, noticed their circular arrangement and then had the brilliant insight to check their alignment with the solstice sun. His discovery was a revelation. It proved that the Mississippian people possessed a sophisticated understanding of solar cycles and the geometric skill to encode that knowledge on a monumental scale. They achieved this with the materials they had available, great trees from the boundless forests, not the quarried stone of the Old World. The eventual decline of Cahokia, likely due to a combination of environmental change and social upheaval, led to the city's abandonment and the woodhenge's slow decay. Its memory faded, and the site was swallowed by prairie grass and then by farmland, its secrets hidden just beneath the surface. For centuries, the dominant narrative of North American history portrayed indigenous cultures as simple hunter-gatherers, incapable of the complex urban and scientific achievements of their counterparts in Europe or Mesoamerica. The Cahokia woodhenge stands as a powerful, silent rebuttal to that erroneous idea. It is a monument to adaptive ingenuity, proving that advanced astronomical knowledge and civic organization do not require stone and mortar. They can be built from wood and wisdom, a testament to a brilliant culture that mastered its world and whose legacy, once forgotten, now challenges us to rethink everything we thought we knew about the ancient Americas. Now we travel to the banks of the Nile, to a monument that represents one of the most audacious acts of political theater ever carved in stone. The great temple of Abu Simbel is not merely a place of worship, it is a profound statement of power, engineered to use the sun itself as a validating spotlight. Commissioned by the great pharaoh Ramses II around 1260 years before the Common Era, this temple was hewn directly into a solid rock cliff face in Nubia, the southernmost region of the Egyptian Empire. Its colossal facade, dominated by 4 gigantic seated statues of Ramses himself, each over 65 feet tall, was designed to awe any traveler approaching from the south. It was a billboard in sandstone, proclaiming the pharaoh's divine authority to both his subjects and any potential enemies. But the true genius of Abu Simbel lies not in what is seen outside, but in a breathtaking astronomical phenomenon that occurs deep within. The temple's interior is a series of successively smaller halls leading to the most sacred space of all, the Sanctum Sanctorum. Here, seated in eternal gloom against the back wall, are statues of 4 deities, the gods Ptah and Amun-Ra, the deified pharaoh Ramses himself, and the sun god Ra-Horakhti. For 363 days of the year, this inner chamber remains shrouded in shadow, but on 2 specific mornings, something miraculous happens. A shaft of sunlight pierces the 200-foot-long, perfectly straight corridor leading into the mountain. It travels through the Grand Hall, past the 8 towering pillars shaped like the king as Osiris, and floods the Holy of Holies. For approximately 20 minutes, the sunlight illuminates 3 of the 4 statues Amun-Ra, Ramses, and Ra-Horakhti, leaving only the statue of Ptah, the god of darkness, in the shadows. The precision is absolute. This celestial light show occurs not on the solstices or equinoxes, but on what Egyptologists believe were the 2 most important dates in the pharaoh's life, his birthday and the anniversary of his coronation. This was no happy accident of architecture. It was a deliberate, staggering feat of engineering and astronomical calculation. The ancient builders had to possess an incredibly sophisticated understanding of the sun's changing path throughout the year. They had to calculate the exact angle of the temple's axis so that the sun's rays would hit the innermost spot on 2 predetermined dates, and only those dates. The effect was pure political propaganda written in sunlight. By orchestrating this event, Ramses was physically demonstrating his intimate, inseparable connection to the sun god. He was showing his people that the very cosmos, the supreme power that gave life to the world, recognized and celebrated his rule. The sun, the source of all life, was literally his father, paying him an annual visit. It was the ultimate legitimization of his power, a divine endorsement that no rival could ever dispute. The story of Abu Simbel, however, does not end in antiquity. In the 1960s, the temple faced complete destruction. The construction of the Aswan High Dam was destined to create a massive reservoir, Lake Nasser, which would submerge the entire site under hundreds of feet of water. In an unprecedented international effort led by UNESCO, engineers and archaeologists from around the world undertook one of the most ambitious rescue operations in history. Over 4 years, the entire temple complex was meticulously sawn into more than 1,000 massive blocks, each weighing up to 30 tons. These blocks were then carefully moved to a new site over 200 feet higher and 650 feet back from the river, and reassembled like the world's most gigantic and precious jigsaw puzzle. The challenge was not just to reconstruct the temple, but to preserve its most sacred feature, the solar alignment. Modern engineers, using the best technology of their day, worked to ensure that the sun would continue to illuminate the inner sanctuary on those 2 hallowed days. Their success is a powerful testament to both ancient ingenuity and modern respect for it. Abu Simbel thus stands as a dual symbol, a monument to one king's ego and genius, and a monument to humanity's collective commitment to preserving our shared, awe-inspiring heritage. Leaving behind the grand stone monuments and imperial temples, we now venture into the heart of Neolithic Europe, to a site that strips astronomical observation down to its most fundamental and communal form. In a quiet field near the town of Goseck in Germany, a simple pattern of concentric ditches and post holes lay hidden for nearly 7,000 years, its secrets preserved just beneath the soil until a startling discovery in 1991. This is the Goseck Circle, a sophisticated solar observatory constructed around 4,900 years before the Common Era, making it one of the oldest known structures of its kind in the world. Its design is a masterpiece of elegant simplicity: 2 concentric circular ditches, an earthen bank, and most importantly, a wooden palisade fence with 3 precise openings or gates. These gates are not randomly placed. One aligns perfectly with the point on the horizon where the sun rises on the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year. Another marks the corresponding sunset on that same pivotal day. The third gate to the south aligns with the summer solstice sunrise, creating a complete solar calendar etched into the landscape. For the early farming communities of this region, the Goseq circle was far more than an abstract scientific instrument. It was the very heartbeat of their annual cycle and their communal identity. The bitter cold of a European winter would have been a time of scarcity and anxiety. As the days grew shorter and the sun climbed lower in the sky, there must have been a deep, primal fear that its life-giving light and warmth might continue to diminish and never return. The winter solstice marked the turning point, the moment the sun halted its southward retreat and began its slow journey back, promising the eventual return of spring. We can imagine the entire community gathering inside the wooden enclosure in the deep darkness of a solstice morning, their breath misting in the frigid air. They would have faced the southeastern gate, waiting in a silence broken only by the crackle of a ceremonial fire. Then, as if on a divine cue, the first sliver of the sun would appear exactly in the center of the gate, its light piercing the complex and striking a central point. This was not just a celestial event, it was a moment of profound relief and celebration. The sun had been reborn, their world was saved for another year. This interpretation is powerfully supported by the artifacts discovered within the circle. Archaeologists unearthed animal bones, specifically the remains of cattle, which showed clear signs of ritual slaughter and communal feasting. There were also fragments of decorated pottery, suggesting that gatherings here involved more than just observation. They involved celebration, ceremony, and the sharing of food. The Goseq circle was a place where science and spirituality were inseparable. The precise astronomical alignment provided the practical knowledge needed to track the seasons for planting and harvest, while the rituals performed there affirmed their cultural beliefs and strengthened social bonds. It was a calendar, a temple, and a community center all in one, a place where the entire village could collectively witness and celebrate the cosmic order that governed their lives. The existence of the Goseq circle is a crucial piece of evidence in a much larger puzzle. It is not an isolated anomaly. Its design and purpose find echoes in dozens of other similar circular enclosures, often called rondels, scattered across Central Europe. This suggests a widespread and shared astronomical culture among these early Neolithic farmers, a common understanding of the skies that transcended individual tribes and villages. They were part of a pan-European network of thought, where knowledge of solstice alignments and calendar keeping was exchanged and refined. The Goseq circle forces us to completely reimagine our view of so-called primitive prehistoric life. These were not brutish cave dwellers merely struggling to survive. They were meticulous observers of their world, possessing a sophisticated understanding of geometry and solar patterns. They invested immense communal effort to build these enclosures, proving that tracking time was a priority that justified significant labor and resources. They encoded their knowledge not in books, but in the very layout of their sacred spaces, creating a permanent record of their intelligence and their reverence for the cosmos, written in wood and earth for a future age to discover. While the Goseq circle used a simple ring of posts to mark the sun's turning points, an entirely different and brilliantly sophisticated solution to tracking the solar year was emerging on the other side of the world. On a barren, wind-swept hilltop in the coastal desert of Peru, a mysterious culture created what many archaeologists now call the oldest solar observatory in the Americas. This is Chankillo, and its design is so elegantly straightforward that its true function was completely misunderstood for centuries. Dating back to approximately 300 years before the Common Era, the site consists of 13 near-identical towers built of stone and mortar, arranged in a near-perfect straight line along the crest of a hill. From a distance, they resemble the spine of a colossal, petrified beast. For generations, visitors assumed they were the fortified walls of a small fortress or a ceremonial center. It wasn't until the early 2000s that researchers looked at this peculiar lineup with fresh eyes and had a revolutionary realization. This was not a fortress at all. It was a gigantic stone calendar, meticulously engineered to track the sun's journey across the sky with incredible accuracy over the course of an entire year. The genius of Chankillo lies in its interactive design. It requires an observer to complete its function. On the western side of the ridge, archaeologists identified the ruins of a well-constructed building that served as the primary western observation point. If you stand here at dawn, you witness a spectacular event. As the sun rises in the east, its brilliant disk appears to emerge directly from the gap between two of the 13 towers. The specific gap from which it rises changes each day. Around the December solstice, the sun rises to the far right of the tower array. Then, day by day, its rising point slowly shifts leftward, appearing from behind a different tower. By the June solstice, it rises at the far left end of the line, before beginning its slow journey back again. Each tower effectively acts as a marker for a specific date on the solar calendar. A priest or sun watcher needed only to note which tower framed the sunrise on a given morning to know precisely where they were in the agricultural and ceremonial cycle. Furthermore, a corresponding observation post on the eastern side of the complex would have allowed for equally precise tracking of the sunsets against the same skyline of towers, creating a complete dual observation system. This precise knowledge was the lifeblood of the Paracas culture, the people who built Chankillo. In this arid environment, where rain is exceedingly rare and life depends on carefully managed river valleys and fog-borne moisture, timing was everything. Knowing the exact solar date allowed them to regulate the planting of crops like maize and cotton, and to schedule the intricate network of irrigation that made agriculture possible. But as with all the sites we've explored, its purpose was far greater than mere agriculture. The entire complex is surrounded by fortified walls and contains structures that clearly indicate it was a major ceremonial center. The solar observations would have been used to determine the dates of important religious festivals, perhaps ones that honored a sun deity or celebrated the renewing power of the solstices. The ability to predict these events with absolute certainty would have bestowed immense power and legitimacy upon the ruling priests or chieftains, who alone could interpret the sun's message from the towers. What makes Chankillo so revolutionary in the history of astronomy is what it tells us about who could achieve such precision. For a long time, the prevailing assumption was that sophisticated astronomical knowledge was the exclusive domain of large, complex, expansionist empires with vast resources, societies like the later Inca or the Maya. Chankillo completely shatters that notion. The Paracas culture was a relatively small, regional society. They did not command a vast imperial territory. Yet they possessed the intellectual capacity, the geometric skill, and the organizational will to design and construct a solar observatory of unparalleled accuracy that would not be rivaled in the Americas for over 1,000 years. They solved the problem of measuring the year not with complex moving parts or written tables, but with pure, fixed landscape architecture, turning a hilltop and its towers into a permanent public calendar for all to see and understand. Its remote location, far from the centers of later Inca power, is likely what preserved it from being dismantled or built over. For centuries, it sat silently on its hill, its secret purpose hidden in plain sight. Its relatively recent rediscovery and interpretation is a thrilling reminder that our understanding of the ancient world is constantly evolving. Chankillo forces us to rewrite the history books on New World astronomy, pushing its timeline back by centuries and crediting a culture that had been largely overlooked. It stands not as a monument to an empire's glory, but to the universal human intellect, a testament to the fact that a deep desire to understand time and the cosmos can flourish anywhere, in any culture, with a brilliance that echoes across millennia. Deep in the southern Ural steppes of Russia, a landscape more often associated with vast, open plains than with architectural wonders, lies a site that compels us to rethink the boundaries of Bronze Age civilization. This is Archaeum, a settlement so meticulously planned and astronomically sophisticated that it has earned the nickname Russia's Stonehenge. But that comparison, while evocative, doesn't quite capture its full complexity. Constructed around 1700 years before the Common Era, Archaeum was far more than a simple stone circle. It was a fortified town, a bustling metalworking hub, and a profound celestial observatory, all seamlessly integrated into a single, breathtaking design. Its discovery was almost accidental. In 1987, Soviet authorities planned to flood the area to create a reservoir. A routine archaeological survey of the doomed valley revealed something extraordinary: the faint, ghostly imprint of concentric circles visible only from the air. This last-minute rescue mission uncovered one of the most important archaeological finds of the 20th century, saving a complete Bronze Age settlement that offers an unparalleled window into a forgotten world. The first thing that strikes you about Archaeum is its geometry. The entire town is laid out in two perfect concentric circles, surrounded by a deep moat and fortified by massive walls of packed earth and timber. These walls were not just for defense, they were the very instrument of astronomy. 4 precise gates punctuated the outer wall, and these were not placed randomly. Extensive research has shown that these gateways are aligned with breathtaking accuracy to key celestial events. One gate aligns with the sunrise on the summer solstice, while another marks the sunrise on the winter solstice. But the people of the Mnajdra culture who built and inhabited Archaeum looked beyond the sun. Other alignments correspond to important lunar events and the risings and settings of specific stars. This means that from the center of the complex, an observer could use the gates as a giant sighting device, tracking the rhythmic dance of the heavens with remarkable precision. The entire town was, in effect, a colossal calendar and an observatory, its very architecture serving as a permanent record of the cosmos. For the Mnajdra people, this celestial knowledge was woven into the very fabric of their daily survival and spiritual identity. As a pastoral culture, their lives depended on the seasonal migration of their herds. The astronomical alignments of Archaeum provided an unerring schedule, telling them precisely when to move to summer pastures and when to return to the shelter of their fortified town before the brutal winter set in. This practical need for a calendar was inextricably linked to their spiritual beliefs. Evidence suggests that metalworking, for which the Mnajdra are renowned, was not merely a craft but a sacred, ritualistic act. The furnaces and smithies found within Archaeum's walls were likely placed in specific locations based on cosmic principles. It is believed that the smelting of bronze was seen as a microcosm of cosmic creation, a transformative process where earthly ore was reborn into a new, sacred form with the blessing of the sun, moon, and stars. The timing of these metallurgical rituals would have been dictated by the celestial cycles observed from the town's gates, blending practical metallurgy with celestial worship. The design of Archaeum reveals a worldview of stunning harmony and order. The strict circular plan, the radial streets leading from the center like spokes on a wheel, and the concentric rings dividing the space into zones for crafts, residence, and ceremony, all point to a society that saw itself as a direct reflection of the universe. Their human-made world was a microcosm designed to mirror the macrocosm of the heavens. This was a place where the celestial and the terrestrial were not separate realms, but were intimately connected and constantly in dialogue. Living in Archaeum meant living inside a model of the cosmos, a constant physical reminder of their place within a larger, ordered system. This profound cosmological philosophy, encoded in clay and timber, challenges the old notion that such sophisticated thought was exclusive to the so-called cradles of civilization, like Mesopotamia or Egypt. Here on the Eurasian steppe, a nomadic pastoral people demonstrated a level of urban planning, astronomical understanding, and spiritual depth that rivals any of their contemporaries. Archaeum's significance extends far beyond its own walls. The Sintashta culture is now widely recognized by scholars as a crucial crucible for the broader Indo-European family of peoples, who would later spread across Europe and parts of Asia. The advanced technologies, social structures, and likely the cosmological ideas that developed at sites like Archaeum may have traveled with these migrations, influencing cultures thousands of miles and centuries removed. This makes Archaeum not an isolated anomaly, but a key piece in the vast puzzle of human history. It stands as a powerful monument to a remote community that looked up at the starry steppe sky and saw not emptiness but a blueprint. They saw a pattern so profound and so beautiful that they felt compelled to recreate it here on Earth, building a fortress for their bodies, a workshop for their crafts, and an observatory for their souls, forever linking their identity to the eternal cycles of the cosmos. While the Caracol at Chichen Itza stands as a dedicated tower for observation, the ancient Maya city of Uxmal presents a different, and in some ways even more brilliant, approach to celestial architecture. Here, the entire cityscape was designed as an instrument, with one building in particular serving as its crown jewel of astronomical precision, the magnificent Governor's Palace. This sprawling, impossibly long structure, adorned with a breathtaking mosaic of nearly 20,000 individually carved stones, is far more than a royal residence or administrative center. It is a permanent stone record of the Mayas' obsession with the planet Venus, a sophisticated observatory without a single moving part, frozen in time for 1,000 years. The palace's primary alignment is a masterpiece of long-term observation and precise engineering. Its central doorway and the entire elongated facade are oriented not to the sun or a star, but to the point on the horizon where Venus, at the extreme southern limit of its complex cycle, makes its first appearance as the evening star. Visualize a priest astronomer standing at a specific marker within the Grand Plaza. On that one critical evening, he would see the brilliant point of light emerge from the darkness precisely over the center line of the palace, a moment of perfect celestial alignment that might only occur once every 8 years. This was not a casual observation. It was the culmination of generations of meticulous record-keeping, a validation of the complex mathematical tables the Maya used to predict the planet's 584-day synodic period. The building itself was the proof of their calculations, a monumental confirmation that their understanding of the cosmos was correct. This knowledge was power in the most literal sense. For the Maya elite who ruled from Uxmal, controlling time was synonymous with controlling the populace. Venus was not a neutral scientific subject. It was a deity, a bringer of both life and destruction, intimately associated with war and the fate of rulers. By accurately predicting its dramatic reappearances and disappearances, the ruling class could manage reality itself. They could announce that the god of war had returned to the sky, signaling an auspicious time to launch a military campaign against a rival city-state. They could schedule grand public ceremonies to coincide with these events, positioning themselves as the indispensable intermediaries between the people and the powerful, often capricious, forces of the cosmos. The very architecture of the city, with its sightlines and alignments known only to the educated priesthood, was a tool of social control, reinforcing the divine right of the elite to rule. The genius of Uxmal's design extends beyond the governor's palace. The entire urban plan is a web of astronomical intent. The placement of the Pyramid of the Magician, the Nunnery Quadrangle, and other major structures creates a series of interlocking sightlines that track the sun's path at the solstices and equinoxes. Doorways frame the rising sun on specific dates, and platforms are positioned to capture significant lunar extremes. This holistic integration of astronomy into the built environment shows a society that did not compartmentalize science. Instead, they lived within a cosmic machine where every walk across a plaza or glance down a street could, for those who understood its language, be a reminder of humanity's place in a vast, orderly, and mathematically precise universe. Despite its grandeur and intellectual sophistication, Uxmal's glory was fleeting. Like many classic Maya centers, it was mysteriously abandoned around the 10th century, its palaces and pyramids slowly reclaimed by the relentless jungle. For centuries, its secrets remained hidden, its astronomical alignments unnoticed by all but the roots and vines that enveloped them. Its rediscovery and decipherment by archaeologists in the modern era has been a gradual process of revelation, peeling back layers of stone and vegetation to reveal the mathematical mind of its builders. Each new study of its alignments offers a deeper insight into the Maya worldview, a perspective that saw no division between the celestial and the terrestrial, the spiritual and the scientific. Uxmal stands not in ruins, but as a permanent testament to a civilization that dared to build a city that was both a home for its people and a precise instrument for measuring the heavens. Now, let's shift our focus to a region whose ancient scientific achievements have been historically and persistently overlooked: the fertile plains straddling the modern border of Senegal and the Gambia. Here, scattered across the landscape in clusters of profound silence, stand the Senegambian stone circles. Erected between the 8th and 11th centuries of the Common Era, these megalithic arrangements are not the haphazard work of a forgotten people, but a sophisticated network of observatories and sacred sites that speak to a deep, indigenous understanding of the heavens. Unlike the towering pyramids of Egypt or the elaborate temples of the Maya, these circles possess a powerful, understated elegance. They are built from massive laterite stones, a iron-rich rock that hardens upon exposure to air, each pillar painstakingly quarried, shaped, and erected by a society that left no written records behind. The sheer scale is humbling. Over 1,000 monuments are arranged in more than 4 dozen individual circles, making this one of the largest and most concentrated collections of megaliths anywhere on Earth. The most famous among them, the circles at Washu, immediately capture the imagination with their sheer size, some of the laterite pillars soaring nearly 10 feet into the air. But their true genius lies not in their height, but in their precise arrangement. Archaeological and archaeoastronomical studies have revealed that these circles are meticulously aligned with key solar and lunar events. Specific stones or gaps between them frame the rising and setting points of the sun during the solstices and equinoxes. This was not an abstract exercise in geometry. It was the very engine of survival for an agricultural society. The primary crop for these communities was millet, a grain whose entire life cycle, from planting to harvest, is acutely sensitive to seasonal rains and dry spells. By using the stone circles as a permanent public calendar, the community's astronomers could determine the optimal time to sow their seeds, ensuring the highest chance of a successful harvest that would feed the population for the coming year. The stones served as an immutable communal almanac, their alignments providing a reliable schedule that governed the most critical aspect of daily life. Yet, to label these sites merely as agricultural tools would be to miss more than half of their story. The circles are also burial sites, with many containing human remains interred beneath the laterite pillars. This physical connection between the stones, the sky, and the ancestors points to a profound spiritual and cosmological belief system. Local oral traditions, passed down through generations, strongly suggest that these spaces were used for rituals that linked the living community to the world of their forebears. The cyclical nature of the celestial bodies, the sun that dies each night and is reborn each morning, the moon that waxes and wanes, would have provided a powerful metaphor for the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. It is easy to imagine the community gathering within the circle at the dawn of the winter solstice, not only to mark the sun's return and the promise of a new planting season, but also to honor their ancestors, whose spirits were believed to be intimately connected to the eternal rhythms of the cosmos. In this way, the Senegambian circles embody a complete worldview where practical science, community memory, and spiritual belief were seamlessly and beautifully intertwined. For centuries, the significance of these monuments was largely ignored by the wider world. They were often mischaracterized by colonial-era observers, their construction sometimes wrongly attributed to outside influences, a persistent trend that has long obscured the scientific innovations of indigenous African cultures. This oversight meant that the stones stood in relative obscurity, their stories known only to local communities and a handful of dedicated scholars. It wasn't until 2006 that the international community formally recognized their immense value, when UNESCO designated the stone circles of Senegambia as a World Heritage Site. This long-delayed acknowledgement is a microcosm of a much larger issue: the systemic neglect of Africa's scientific heritage in global historical narratives. For too long, the story of astronomy has been told with a focus on Europe, the Middle East, and Mesoamerica, while the groundbreaking work of African astronomers was relegated to the footnotes. The enduring presence of these circles is a powerful corrective to that incomplete history. They stand as undeniable proof that the drive to understand the cosmos and to harness that knowledge for cultural survival is a universal human impulse, one that flourished with unique brilliance in West Africa. They developed independently without influence from the Islamic North or European traders, creating a truly autochthonous tradition of science and engineering. The Senegambian stone circles invite us to expand our map of astronomical history, to include the banks of the Gambia River alongside the deserts of Egypt and the jungles of Guatemala. They are a lasting monument to a society that looked to the stars to guide their lives on Earth, and in doing so, carved their intelligence and their reverence into the very landscape itself, creating a legacy of stone and sky that finally demands our attention and our respect. While the observatories of the ancient world reveal humanity's first steps in decoding the cosmos, the story of astronomy is not one of a single, linear progression. In the heart of what was once the world's largest and most advanced city, a different kind of astronomical tradition flourished, one of bureaucratic precision, imperial mandate, and ultimately, a remarkable fusion of Eastern and Western thought. Perched atop a centuries-old section of the Beijing city wall, the Beijing Ancient Observatory stands as a silent sentinel to this unique chapter. Its official founding in 1442 during the Ming Dynasty was not the beginning, but rather a formalization of a celestial observation tradition that stretched back over 2 millennia in China. Unlike the solitary stone circles or remote mountaintop temples of earlier eras, this was an observatory deeply embedded in the machinery of state, a government institution whose primary purpose was to serve the emperor and ensure the harmonious functioning of the entire empire. The mandate of the scholars who worked here was immense and profoundly practical. their most critical task was the creation and maintenance of the imperial calendar. In the Chinese worldview, the emperor ruled with the mandate of heaven, a divine right that required him to maintain perfect harmony between the celestial realm and the earthly one. A single error in the calendar, a failure to predict an eclipse or to accurately mark the solstices, was not just a scientific mistake. It was a dire omen, a sign that the emperor was losing heaven's favor and that the dynasty itself could be at risk. This immense pressure fueled an unbroken tradition of meticulous observation and record-keeping. For centuries, court astronomers diligently logged everything from the precise paths of planets and stars to the sudden, terrifying appearance of guest stars, what we now know as supernova, and the ominous dark blemishes on the sun we call sunspots. This vast archive of data allowed them to refine their models of the universe with astonishing accuracy, creating calendars that were vital for scheduling the planting and harvest of crops across the vast empire, thus directly governing the food supply and stability of millions. The physical instruments they used to make these observations were masterpieces of bronze casting and geometric design, and they remain the observatory's most striking feature today. Unlike the portable brass astrolabes common in Europe, the Beijing instruments were massive, fixed installations designed for unparalleled stability and precision. They included enormous armillary spheres for mapping the coordinates of celestial objects, quadrant altizimuths for measuring their altitudes, and a massive gnomon for determining the exact moment of the noon solstice. The true turning point in the observatory's long history, however, came in the mid-17th century. As the Ming dynasty fell and the Qing dynasty ascended, a group of Jesuit missionaries arrived in Beijing. Among them were skilled astronomers like Ferdinand Verbiest, who saw an opportunity to gain favor with the new emperor by offering updated European astronomical knowledge. In a fascinating twist of history, the Kangxi Emperor appointed Verbiest to head the Imperial Board of Astronomy. Rather than discarding centuries of Chinese tradition, Verbiest and his successors did something extraordinary. They supervised the casting of new instruments that blended the latest European Renaissance design with its elaborate Baroque decorations and telescopic sights, with the core principles and functions of the existing Chinese equipment. This created a unique synthesis on the Beijing platform. The new instruments featured Latin inscriptions alongside Chinese celestial nomenclature, and their designs incorporated Tychonic and Copernican principles while still serving the ancient Chinese cosmological purpose of creating a perfect calendar. For over 200 years, this fusion of knowledge thrived. The observatory remained active well into the 1920s, making it one of the longest continuously operating astronomical sites in the entire world. It witnessed the collapse of the imperial system, the rise of the Republic, and the dawn of modern astrophysics, all while maintaining its watch from the old city wall. Today, the original bronze instruments stand as open-air museum pieces, silent monuments to a time when Beijing was a crossroads of global science. Their preservation tells a crucial story that is often absent from Western-centric histories of astronomy, that the quest to understand the heavens was a global endeavor, and that China's sophisticated, continuous, and state-sponsored tradition of astronomical science forms a parallel and equally vital narrative in humanity's journey to comprehend the cosmos. Nestled deep within the humid jungles of Chiapas, Mexico, the ancient Maya city of Palenque feels like a place suspended between worlds. Here, amidst the echoing calls of howler monkeys and the dense green canopy, stands a group of temples that represent one of the most exquisite fusions of art, science, and spirituality ever achieved. Among them, the Temple of the Cross complex holds a secret not in its intricate carvings or grand stairways, but in the very way it was positioned to harness the sun. Built around 600 years into the Common Era, this temple is a masterclass in architectural alignment, designed so that on the winter solstice, the setting sun would cast its final, golden rays in a precise and dramatic way, plunging into the temple's heart at a specific angle. This was no casual effect. It was a calculated, celestial event engineered into stone, a moment where the dying sun of the old year seemed to communicate directly with the gods enshrined within. For the Maya priests of Palenque, this annual solar performance was far more than a beautiful light show. It was a critical chapter in their most sacred story. The winter solstice, the shortest day of the year, is a time of profound transition. The sun appears at its weakest only to be reborn and begin its journey back towards strength and longer days. The Maya saw this as a direct parallel to the cycle of their beloved maize god, a central deity who represented life, death, and resurrection. According to their mythology, the maize god was decapitated and then miraculously reborn. Much like a seed of corn must be buried and die in the earth before it can sprout new life. The Temple of the Cross was the stage for this cosmic drama. As the solstice sun set in perfect alignment with the temple, it was believed to symbolically enter the underworld, reenacting the death of the maize god. The following sunrise would then mark his triumphant rebirth, ensuring the continuation of life and the promise of the next harvest. This wasn't just mythology, it was a cosmological truth made visible through architecture, a way of physically demonstrating that the ruler and his priests held the power to facilitate this essential, life-giving cycle. This celestial narrative was woven into the very fabric of the city's power structure. The ruler of Palenque who commissioned these temples, most famously the great Kainish Jantar Mantar, understood the potent political value of this astronomical theater. By controlling the narrative of the gods and their connection to the sun, he could solidify his own claim to a divine right to rule. The elaborate carvings inside the Temple of the Cross don't just depict gods, they show Pakal's own ancestors interacting with these deities, positioning his bloodline as the essential intermediaries between the human world and the divine. The carefully timed celestial events like the solstice sunset were a form of live propaganda. They were public proof that the king's actions on earth were in perfect harmony with the cosmos, that his rituals were necessary to ensure the sun would return and the crops would grow. In this way, astronomy became the ultimate tool of legitimacy, a science employed to validate a dynasty's power and secure the loyalty of its people through awe and shared belief. The genius of Palenque's design extends beyond grand solar alignments to more subtle, intricate details. The towering, lattice-like structures on the roofs of these temples, known as roof combs, were not merely decorative. They were engineered to act as sophisticated shadow casters. At specific times of the year, perhaps on the equinoxes or other significant calendar dates, these perforated stone frameworks would throw a complex pattern of light and shadow across the temple's front panels or the plaza below. For a culture that read the world as a series of sacred signs and symbols, these moving shadows would have been a dynamic, changing script written by the sun itself, marking the passage of time and signaling the appropriate moments for specific ceremonies or offerings. This integration of art and science is what makes Palenque so breathtaking. Every element of its construction served multiple purposes. It was beautiful sculpture, precise astronomical instrument, sacred temple, and political monument, all fused into one coherent whole. For centuries, this brilliance lay hidden, swallowed by the relentless jungle. It wasn't until the 19th century that explorers like John Lloyd Stevens and Frederick Catherwood began to clear the vines and document the ruins, unveiling a lost world to an astonished modern audience. The subsequent decipherment of Maya hieroglyphics, much of it pioneered through work at Palenque, finally gave voice to these silent stones, allowing us to read the names of the kings and understand the stories they were so desperate to tell. The Temple of the Cross, therefore, is more than an observatory. It is a permanent stone library, its shelves aligned with the heavens, holding the story of a people who saw no divide between the equations that predict a solstice and the art that celebrates it. They remind us that in the ancient mind, to measure time was to tell a story, and to tell a story was to participate in the eternal, repeating drama of the universe itself. High atop the windswept plateau of the Bighorn Mountains in Wyoming, nearly 10,000 feet above sea level, lies a structure of profound simplicity and deep meaning. The Bighorn Medicine Wheel is not built of towering stones or grand architecture. It is a sacred pattern laid upon the earth, a central cairn of stones from which 28 spokes radiate outward, connected by a larger outer ring. To the untrained eye, it might appear as a mysterious but rudimentary arrangement. Yet, for the Plains Indian nations, including the Crow, Arapaho, Shoshone, and Cheyenne peoples, this wheel was, and for many still is, a sophisticated cosmic map and a deeply spiritual gateway, perfectly aligned with the rhythms of the heavens and the earth. The genius of the medicine wheel is etched in its precise alignments with the summer solstice sunrise and the rising points of key bright stars. If you were to stand at the central cairn on the dawn of the summer solstice, you would witness the first sliver of the sun break the horizon in perfect alignment with a specific stone outside the wheel's circumference. This moment marked the pinnacle of the sun's power, a turning point in the year of immense practical and ceremonial importance. But the wheel's celestial knowledge extends far beyond the sun. Other spokes point to the heliacal rising of brilliant stars like Aldebaran in Taurus and Sirius, the dog star. For a nomadic culture deeply attuned to the cycles of nature, these stellar events were not abstract astronomy. The rise of Aldebaran just before the sun, for instance, served as a critical signal that the great buffalo herds would soon be moving into their summer grazing ranges. This was life or death information, dictating the timing of the communal hunts that would provide food, clothing, and tools for the coming winter. The wheel was, in this sense, a survival tool, an almanac written in stone on a mountaintop. Yet to define it solely by its practical utility is to miss its true essence. The term medicine in its name speaks to its spiritual power, not to any physical healing. This was a place of ceremony, vision quests, and profound connection. Oral traditions describe how individuals would journey to the wheel to pray, fast, and seek guidance from the spirit world. The number 28 holds significant power, corresponding not only to the spokes of the wheel but also to the days of the lunar cycle. This connection to the moon, a feminine and intuitive force, balanced the solar alignment, representing a holistic worldview that sought harmony between all things. The wheel was a place where a young person might come to find their purpose, where elders would pray for the well-being of their people, and where the entire community might gather to reaffirm their relationship with the Creator and the creation. It was a university of the spirit and an observatory of the soul, where understanding the stars was inseparable from understanding one's place in the universe. The very simplicity of its construction is its most brilliant feature, perfectly adapted to the life of the people who used it. Unlike the permanent stone cities of sedentary cultures, the Bighorn Medicine Wheel reflects a nomadic existence. It required no quarrying, no complex engineering, and no maintenance. It could be built, used, and left upon the landscape without altering it fundamentally. The knowledge of its alignments and ceremonies was not stored in books or carved into walls. It was carried in the living memory and oral traditions of the people, passed down through generations. This portability of knowledge meant their science could travel with them, a timeless system that could be recreated anywhere the people roamed. The wheel on the mountain was not unique. It is simply one of the best preserved examples of a much wider tradition of medicine wheels across the North American plains, each serving as a local node in a vast, continent-wide network of indigenous astronomical knowledge. For early European settlers and archaeologists who encountered it, the wheel was a puzzle, lacking the cultural context and dismissive of native intellectual achievements. They often attributed it to a mythical, lost race or dismissed it as a primitive relic. Its true purpose as a precise astronomical observatory was only confirmed through meticulous research in the late 1960s and 70s, when astronomers like John Eddy began to carefully plot its alignments and listen to the preserved oral histories. This scientific validation was a crucial step in challenging deep-seated stereotypes that had long denied the complexity of indigenous knowledge systems. The ongoing preservation of the site, now protected as a National Historic Landmark, is a testament to a growing recognition of its value. It stands as a powerful monument to a way of knowing that did not seek to conquer nature, but to harmonize with it. A system where tracking a star was an act of reverence, and where a calendar was not just a tool for measuring time, but a guide for living a good life within the great, turning wheel of the cosmos. As we push the boundaries of how far back we can trace humanity's celestial curiosity, we arrive at a site shrouded in both deep time and deep mystery. Nestled in the rolling hills of Tennessee, the Coates Hines site presents a puzzle that, if solved, could fundamentally rewrite the story of astronomy in the Americas. This is not a grand stone circle or a towering temple, but a much humbler and therefore more tantalizing collection of features, dating back an astonishing 12,000 years to a period known as the Paleo-Indian era. This location offers a glimpse into the world of the very first human pioneers to set foot on the North American continent. These were nomadic hunter-gatherers living in a landscape still reshaped by the last ice age, sharing the environment with now extinct megafauna like the mastodon and the mammoth. It is within this ancient context that archaeologists uncovered something extraordinary: a deliberate arrangement of large stones alongside the butchered remains of a mastodon, suggesting this was a place of both subsistence and something more. The positioning of these stones has led some researchers to propose a radical idea that they were aligned with specific stars or celestial events, potentially making this the oldest potential observatory in the entire New World. The evidence, however, is far from conclusive, and this is where the site's true significance lies. It exists in a fascinating space of scientific debate. The stone arrangements could be the remnants of a simple hunting blind, a place to process a massive kill, or even a structure with purely utilitarian purposes that we can no longer fully comprehend. There is no carved inscription, no obvious sightline that screams celestial alignment to the untrained eye. The interpretation relies on sophisticated statistical analysis and a careful comparison of the stone placements with the Pleistocene sky, as it would have appeared 12 millennia ago. This controversy is not a weakness of the site, it is its greatest strength. The Coates Hines site forces archaeologists and archaeoastronomers to ask incredibly difficult questions. How do we reliably identify intentional astronomical alignment in the archaeological record, especially from a period so remote that any organic materials, wood, fiber, paint have long since vanished? What does astronomy look like for a culture that is entirely mobile, leaving behind only the barest traces of their presence on the landscape? The debate itself is a healthy and necessary part of the scientific process, a reminder that our understanding of the past is always evolving, always subject to new discoveries and new interpretations. Imagine the world these first Americans inhabited. They were people on the move, navigating vast, unfamiliar continents without maps, guided by the stories passed down through generations and the constant, reliable patterns above them. In this context, even a basic understanding of the stars would have been not an abstract science, but a critical survival tool. The ability to recognize the North Star, or to know that the appearance of a certain constellation heralded a change in seasons, could mean the difference between life and death. It could guide them to migratory routes of the herds they depended on, or help them find their way back to known water sources or sheltered valleys. The Coats Hines site, with its combination of a mammoth kill and possible celestial markers, perfectly encapsulates this idea. It might represent a place where the practical need for food intersected with a deeper, spiritual or navigational need to understand one's place in the cosmos. Perhaps after a successful hunt, the community would gather, and the elders would use the stone arrangements to point out the stories in the stars, linking their recent triumph to the eternal patterns of the night sky, weaving their immediate survival into the larger tapestry of the universe. This site, therefore, is a powerful lesson in humility. It stands as a stark reminder of how much we simply do not know about the deep past. The further back we go, the more fragmentary the evidence becomes, and the more we must rely on informed interpretation rather than definitive proof. The Coats Hines site challenges the often unstated assumption that complex astronomical observation is a product of settled, agricultural societies. It dares us to consider that the roots of timekeeping and celestial reverence may be as old as humanity itself, stretching back to those first curious people who looked up at the panoply of stars from a new world and sought to find their way within it. Its controversial nature is not a mark against it, but an invitation to keep looking, to keep questioning, and to remain open to the possibility that the oldest observatory on Earth might not be made of towering granite, but of simple stones placed by a hunter's hand, forever waiting for the right eyes to see their true purpose. Now we journey to the banks of the Indus River, to the sprawling, meticulously planned metropolis of Mohenjo-Daro, a city that presents us with one of history's most tantalizing and unresolved puzzles. Flourishing around 2,500 years before the Common Era, this was the heart of the enigmatic Harappan civilization, a society that rivaled ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia in its complexity, yet left behind no deciphered written records, no grand temples filled with hieroglyphs, and no royal tombs proclaiming the glory of its kings. What it did leave behind was a masterpiece of urban planning so advanced that it feels almost modern. The city's streets are laid out in a near-perfect grid pattern, with wide main thoroughfares and smaller lanes dividing the city into precise blocks. It boasted an incredible public water supply and sewage system, with individual homes featuring bathrooms and drains that connected to a city-wide network. This was a society of extraordinary engineers and administrators, a civilization that clearly valued order, hygiene, and community welfare on a scale that would not be seen again for thousands of years. It is within this context of almost surreal urban sophistication that a subtle but compelling mystery emerges. When archaeologists began to meticulously map the city's remains, they noticed something intriguing about its orientation. The entire street grid, and by extension the walls of most major buildings, are not aligned to the cardinal directions as we know them. Instead, the city is rotated, consistently offset by a specific angle. This was clearly not a haphazard decision. For a culture that planned every other aspect of their city with such mathematical precision, this orientation must have been deliberate. The most plausible explanation, one that resonates with what we've seen in cultures across the globe, is that this alignment was astronomical. The main axis of the city may have been oriented to the rising or setting sun on a solstice, or perhaps to the position of a particularly important star. In a society without magnetic compasses, the most reliable and sacred way to establish a permanent direction was to use the unchanging heavens as a guide. By aligning their entire world to the cosmos, they were literally building celestial order into their daily lives, grounding their immense urban achievement in the eternal rhythms of the universe. This potential celestial alignment would have served a multitude of purposes, blending the deeply practical with the profoundly spiritual. On a utilitarian level, a uniform city orientation dictated by the sun would have provided a natural and reliable clock for its inhabitants. The shadows cast by buildings would have moved in predictable patterns throughout the day, allowing people to tell the time simply by looking at the edge of a roof or the corner of a street. This shared public timekeeping would have synchronized the daily rhythms of a vast population, coordinating the work of merchants, artisans, and administrators in a society that clearly thrived on meticulous organization. Furthermore, this grand civic alignment could have been used to mark the seasons. The sun would have risen and set at different points along the straight, endless vista of the main streets throughout the year, providing a massive, urban-scale calendar that everyone could unconsciously participate in simply by walking through their city. Yet, for a civilization as complex as the Harappans, the purpose was certainly greater than mere scheduling. The ability to orchestrate the construction of an entire city according to a cosmic blueprint was a staggering display of power and knowledge. It would have reinforced the authority of the ruling class, whoever they may have been, by demonstrating their unique ability to commune with the heavens and impose that divine order onto the earthly realm. The city itself became a permanent monument to their cosmological understanding, a physical manifestation of their belief in a harmonious universe where human affairs were a direct reflection of celestial patterns. This idea of cosmo-magical alignment is found in ancient cities from China to Mesoamerica, and it seems Mohenjo-Daro may be one of its earliest and most ambitious examples. The very act of founding the city likely began with a sacred ceremony where priests determined the primary axis by observing the stars or the sun, turning the soil itself into a sacred text written in alignment with the gods. The frustrating and fascinating truth, however, is that we may never know for certain. The silent nature of the Indus Valley civilization, whose script remains stubbornly undeciphered, means we are interpreting their intentions from architecture alone. Without a Rosetta Stone to translate their symbols or inscriptions explaining their rituals, the celestial purpose of Mohenjo-Daro's layout remains in the realm of compelling hypothesis. This ambiguity is itself a powerful lesson. It forces us to confront the limits of our understanding and to approach the past with a sense of humility. We see a civilization that was arguably the most practical and organized of the ancient world, yet we must also consider that their practicality was likely infused with a rich spiritual and astronomical life that we can only glimpse through the angle of their streets. The mystery of Mohenjo-Daro invites us to look beyond the obvious, to see the potential for sacred meaning in the most utilitarian of designs, and to appreciate that for ancient peoples, the line between science, urban planning, and religion was often beautifully and intentionally blurred. Of all the celestial spectacles engineered by the ancient Maya, few are as visually stunning or widely recognized as the descent of Kukulkan. Each year, on the spring and autumn equinoxes, a shadow slithers down the northern staircase of the Great Pyramid at Chichen Itza, known as El Castillo. As the sun sets, a series of 7 isosceles triangles of light interlock with the shadow, creating the undulating body of a serpent that appears to crawl from the sky to the earth, connecting the temple at the summit with the giant stone snake heads carved at the base. This breathtaking display draws thousands of visitors, yet for all its dramatic beauty, This famous light show is merely the most visible feature of a structure that functions as one of the most sophisticated and multifaceted solar observatories ever built. The true genius of El Castillo lies not in its skin, but in its skeleton. The pyramid is a masterpiece of mathematical and astronomical encoding, a massive stone calculator designed to measure the passage of time with relentless accuracy. Its most fundamental timekeeping feature is its very structure. The pyramid has 4 stairways, each with 91 steps. When you add the top platform as the final step, you arrive at a total of 365, one for each day of the solar year. This was not a hidden secret but a public declaration, a permanent calendar etched into the architecture that everyone could see and understand. The 9 terraced levels on each side are divided by the staircases, creating 18 sections, a number that corresponds to the months in the Maya solar calendar. This meticulous numbering system turned the entire building into a constant, immutable reminder of the cosmic order, a daily presence in the life of the city that kept the entire society synchronized with the solar cycle. But the pyramid's astronomical purpose extends far beyond this symbolic counting. Its alignments were engineered to track a solar phenomenon unique to the Yucatan Peninsula, the zenith passage. Because Chichen Itza lies just 20 degrees north of the equator, the sun passes directly overhead at the zenith twice a year. On these days, vertical objects cast no shadow at noon. For the Maya, these were days of immense significance, occurring in late May and late July, perfectly bracketing the crucial planting season for maize, the sacred staple of life. The entire western facade of El Castillo was designed to be perfectly aligned with the setting sun on the very day of the zenith passage. This precise orientation would have provided an unerring signal to the priests and farmers that the heavens had ordained the time to plant, ensuring the life-giving rains would follow. This practical, agricultural function was the bedrock of the pyramid's existence, linking its celestial grandeur directly to the survival of the people. The sophistication of El Castillo's design permeates even its most unexpected features, such as its acoustics. A hand clap at the base of the pyramid stairway produces a chirping echo that remarkably resembles the call of the sacred Quetzal bird, a creature intimately associated with the Maya serpent deity Kukulkan. This was likely no happy accident. The precise angle and spacing of the steps appear to have been calculated to create this specific sonic effect, turning the pyramid into not just a visual spectacle but an auditory instrument for ritual. Furthermore, the internal construction reveals a deeper history and purpose. Within the visible pyramid lies an older, smaller one, and deep inside that, archaeologists discovered a secret chamber containing a powerful religious symbol, a red jaguar throne inlaid with jade, with eyes that likely once glowed with reflective obsidian. This layering of structures and treasures suggests that each phase of construction was a sacred act, a renewal of cosmic vows, with the outer shell precisely aligning with and amplifying the spiritual power of the inner sanctum. Political power wielded through this architecture cannot be overstated. The ruler who commissioned El Castillo was not just building a temple, he was constructing the ultimate tool of legitimacy. By claiming the ability to predict the serpent's descent and the zenith sun, he presented himself as the sole intermediary between the people and the gods. The public ceremonies held on the plaza below, timed to these celestial events, were demonstrations of his unique access to divine knowledge. The awe inspired by the equinox shadow, the certainty provided by the agricultural calendar, and the sacred sounds echoing from the stairs all served to reinforce a social order where the king's right to rule was as natural and unquestionable as the movement of the sun itself. The pyramid was the central processor in a network of power, blending science, religion, and statecraft into an indestructible whole. For centuries after the abandonment of Chichen Itza, the secrets of El Castillo lay dormant, its true purpose misunderstood by the outside world. Its 20th century rediscovery and the decoding of its alignments ignited a global fascination with Maya astronomy, forcing a re-evaluation of pre-Columbian science. We came to understand that this was not a primitive monument of superstition, but a precision instrument of stunning intellectual achievement. It stands today as a timeless lesson in holistic design, proving that the most enduring and powerful structures are those that serve multiple masters. El Castillo is a temple that tells time, a calendar that inspires awe, a scientific instrument that speaks with the voice of a god. It demonstrates that the highest function of architecture is not to choose between beauty and precision, but to achieve a sublime synthesis where each elevates the other, creating a legacy that continues to captivate and educate the world 1,000 years after its construction. While the observatories of the ancient world stand as silent stone monuments to their cultures, the astronomical revolution of the Islamic Golden Age was a dynamic, living network of scholarship that stretched across continents. From the 9th to the 13th centuries, a period when much of Europe was mired in intellectual stagnation, a vibrant and cosmopolitan scientific culture flourished under Islamic rule. This was not a single location but a movement, centered in magnificent institutions like the House of Wisdom in Baghdad and the great observatories of Damascus, Marrakech, and Samarkand. These were not lonely towers for solitary stargazers. They were state-funded research centers, bustling with teams of astronomers, mathematicians, translators, and instrument makers, all working in a collaborative spirit that would feel remarkably modern to us today. At the helm were intellectual giants whose names should be as familiar as Newton or Galileo. Scholars like Al-Batani, whose precise observations of the solar year were accurate to within minutes of our modern calculations, and Al-Tusi, who developed groundbreaking mathematical models to explain the complex motions of the planets, fundamentally challenging the flawed Ptolemaic system that had dominated for 1,000 years. The engine of this revolution was a suite of instruments of breathtaking beauty and precision, masterpieces of brass and mathematics. The astrolabe, a handheld computer of the medieval world, could tell the time from the sun or stars, calculate latitudes, and even determine prayer times. Larger, fixed versions like massive masonry quadrants and armillary spheres were built into the observatories themselves, some so enormous that a person could walk along their calibrated scales to take readings. These tools allowed for an unprecedented level of accuracy in mapping the heavens, leading to the creation of updated planetary tables, known as ZIJ, and star catalogues that were the most reliable in the world for centuries. This relentless pursuit of precision was driven by both practical and spiritual needs. Accurate calendars were essential for scheduling the lunar months of the Islamic calendar and determining the exact direction of Mecca for prayer, while a deeper understanding of the cosmos was seen as a way to appreciate the sublime order and intelligence of the divine creation. Perhaps the most profound and lasting contribution of this era was its role as a great global knowledge exchange. The scholars of the Islamic world did not work in a vacuum. They actively sought out and preserved the learning of previous civilizations, undertaking a monumental translation movement. Greek texts by Ptolemy, Aristotle, and Plato, along with groundbreaking Indian and Persian works on mathematics and astronomy, were meticulously translated into Arabic. This act of preservation was nothing short of heroic. While these ancient libraries were being lost or forgotten elsewhere, Islamic scholars saved them, but they did not merely act as librarians. They became peerless critics and innovators, studying these texts, identifying their errors, testing their theories against their own meticulous observations, and then synthesizing everything into a new, more advanced body of scientific knowledge. This refined and expanded knowledge would later travel west, entering Europe through centers of learning in Spain and Sicily, where it was translated into Latin and became the fundamental fuel for the European Renaissance and the scientific revolution. Figures like Copernicus and Kepler stood directly on the shoulders of these Islamic giants, building upon the planetary models and mathematical tools they had inherited. Yet for all its brilliance, the physical legacy of this golden age is almost entirely gone. The great observatories of Baghdad, Damascus, and Marrakech were not abandoned peacefully. They were ravaged by some of the most devastating invasions in history. The Mongol siege of Baghdad in 1258 was a cataclysm of unimaginable scale. The Tigris River was said to have run black with the ink of countless books flung from the libraries of the House of Wisdom and red with the blood of the scholars who had worked there. While the destruction was likely not as total as some chroniclers claimed, the loss was profound and irreplaceable. The great institutions, along with their precious instruments and unique research, were shattered. The political and social turmoil that followed these invasions slowly choked off the funding and the intellectual freedom that had made the Golden Age possible. The observatories, as physical structures of wood, brick, and brass, crumbled into dust, their locations often lost to time. This physical erasure led to a centuries-long forgetting of their contributions in the Western world. As Europe entered its own age of scientific enlightenment, it often crafted a narrative that leaped from the Greeks directly to the Renaissance, conveniently skipping over the indispensable Islamic bridge that connected the two. This was not just an oversight, it was a profound historical injustice that obscured the true, multicultural roots of modern science. The story of these lost observatories is a powerful lesson in the fragility of knowledge. It shows how political violence and social collapse can, in a terrifyingly short time, erase the most advanced centers of learning from the face of the earth. But it is also a stunning lesson in the resilience of ideas. Though the buildings were destroyed, the texts survived. The carefully transcribed manuscripts, the corrected star charts, the new mathematical theorems, these were carried by scholars fleeing conflict, preserved in libraries from Spain to India, and eventually passed on to a new world hungry for knowledge. The structures themselves were lost, but the intellectual light they generated never truly went out. It simply migrated, crossing cultural and linguistic barriers to ignite the minds of future generations, proving that while empires fall and observatories turn to rubble, the pursuit of understanding is a flame that is incredibly difficult to extinguish. For our final journey, we travel to a landscape that holds one of the oldest continuous astronomical traditions on Earth. In the vast, sun-baked plains of Victoria, Australia, a collection of stones known as Wurdi Yuang rests quietly, its true purpose hidden in plain sight for generations. To the untrained eye, it appears as a simple, egg-shaped arrangement of basalt rocks. But for the Aboriginal peoples of the region, particularly the Wathaurong people, this site is a sophisticated stone calendar, a university of the sky that has functioned for uncounted millennia. The arrangement is meticulously aligned with the movements of the sun, with key stones marking the precise points on the horizon where the sun sets on the summer and winter solstices and the spring and autumn equinoxes. This was not a one-time construction but a living site, maintained and used across hundreds of generations. Its meaning and function passed down through an unbroken chain of oral tradition and practical teaching. This method of knowledge transmission is what makes Wurdi Yuang and sites like it so revolutionary to our understanding of scientific history. In a world that often equates advanced knowledge with written records and permanent architecture, Aboriginal astronomy presents a powerful counter-narrative. Here, the entire curriculum of the cosmos, the complex motions of the sun, the moon, the planets, and the star clusters known as the emu in the sky or the Seven Sisters, was memorized, recited, and physically enacted through songlines, stories, and dances that crisscrossed the continent. An elder did not need to consult a parchment or a stone tablet. They carried the knowledge within them, and they could read the calendar from the land itself. The stones at Wurdi were not the source of the knowledge but a permanent anchor point for it, a physical mnemonic device that grounded a vast and sophisticated understanding of celestial mechanics in a specific place, ensuring its accuracy could be verified and taught to each new generation. The purpose of this celestial knowledge was deeply woven into a philosophy of sustainable living and profound ecological connection. The timing of the solstices and equinoxes was not an abstract measurement. It signaled critical turning points in the seasonal abundance of the land. The appearance of certain stars at dawn would indicate when the eggs of the malleefowl bird were ready to be collected, when a particular tuber was fat and ready to harvest, or when fish would be running plentifully in the rivers. This was a science of survival, a precise environmental management system that ensured resources were used wisely and never over-harvested. The ceremonies held at sites like Wurdi were celebrations of this abundance and reaffirmations of a sacred responsibility to care for country. Astronomy, in this context, was inseparable from ecology, ethics, and law, a holistic system for living in harmonious balance with the natural world. The preservation of this knowledge through the brutal period of European colonization is a testament to incredible resilience and cultural strength. When land was stolen, languages were suppressed, and children were forcibly removed from their families, the ancient astronomical knowledge was protected. It was kept alive in secret, whispered in stories told out of earshot of the authorities, encoded in paintings and carvings whose full meaning was known only to the initiated. The recent academic recognition of sites like Wurdi is not a discovery by outsiders, but a long overdue validation of a truth that Aboriginal people have always held. It represents a slow and painful shift toward acknowledging the depth and sophistication of Indigenous scientific thought, a system developed over 65,000 years of careful observation and adaptation. This final observatory does more than just add another entry to our list. It fundamentally expands our very definition of what an observatory is and can be. It challenges the Western model of a dedicated building for a specialized few. Instead, it presents astronomy as a living, breathing practice, integrated into the daily life and spiritual identity of an entire community. The observatory is not a separate structure, it is the landscape itself. The dome of the sky is its roof, and the horizon is its calibrated instrument. Wurdi teaches us that the most enduring scientific traditions are those that are not written in stone, but sung in stories, danced in ceremonies, and lived in a deep, reciprocal relationship with the land and the sky. It is a powerful reminder that to understand the universe, we must first remember our place within it. From the stark megaliths of Nabta Playa to the living traditions etched into the Australian landscape at Wurdi this journey across 22 forgotten observatories reveals something far deeper than a collection of ancient ruins. It uncovers a universal human impulse, a shared quest that transcends continents and millennia, the profound need to understand our place in time by reading the story written in the stars. What emerges is a stunning realization. Astronomy was never a niche pursuit for a specialized few. It was the very bedrock of civilization, a foundational element woven inseparably into the fabric of culture, the core of spiritual belief and the absolute key to survival. These structures were not separate from society. They were its heart, synchronizing the planting of crops with the solstices, legitimizing the rule of kings with celestial omens, and answering our deepest existential questions with the predictable rhythms of the cosmos. Each of these sites, though lost to sand, jungle, and the forgetfulness of centuries, represents a unique thread in a magnificent global tapestry of knowledge. The Maya precision with Venus, the Zapotec tracking of Capella, the immense stone instruments of Singh, these were not isolated flashes of genius. They were part of a vast, uncoordinated, yet collective human project to measure the infinite. Every observation, every precisely aligned stone, and every calculated calendar contributed incrementally to our modern understanding of the year, the day, and the season. The methods and materials differed wildly, from the wooden posts of Cahokia to the bronze armilleries of Beijing, but the goal was always the same: to find order in the chaos, to predict the unpredictable, and to secure a future by harmonizing human life with the grand clockwork of the universe. As we reflect on these innovations, from the oldest solar calendar in the Americas at Chankillo to the academic synthesis of the Islamic Golden Age, we see that the drivers of progress are timeless, sheer curiosity and meticulous observation. These qualities know no cultural boundaries. They flourished in the deserts of Egypt, the highlands of Peru, the plains of North America, and the steppes of Russia, proving that the desire to comprehend the cosmos is a fundamental part of what makes us human. This journey challenges the narrow, Eurocentric narratives of scientific history, inviting us to embrace a far richer, more diverse story of global discovery. Let this exploration serve as an inspiration to look up at the night sky with fresh eyes and a renewed sense of wonder. The same stars that guided the builders of the Senegambian stone circles still shine down on us today. Perhaps this knowledge will compel you to visit these incredible sites, to stand where ancient astronomers stood and witness a solstice sunrise for yourself, or simply to step outside on a clear night and trace the constellations they once mapped. We encourage you to share these stories, to keep this recovered knowledge alive, and to continue the conversation. Let us know in the comments which observatory amazed you the most. Was it the practicality of the Big-Horn medicine wheel, the political theater of Abu Simbel, or the heartbreaking loss of the Baghdad observatories? Your curiosity fuels this channel. Subscribe so you don't miss our next adventure into history's hidden corners. Until then, keep looking up, keep questioning, and keep exploring the endless mysteries that lie both above us in the stars and below us in the dust of forgotten